Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Next Gen Regen. I knew it was going to be a challenging one to say. My name's Genever. We've also got Nick here, and we're going to, in a couple of minutes, just start having a chat with William Emerson and Tom Vickers. But before we start, we will attempt to have a conversation about what we've been up to since the last one, which is months ago. So, Nick, highlights, what you've been doing.
Hi, everyone. Highlights. We've had COVID.
Highlight?
No, I thought it was a hangover from New Year's Eve wedding, and it was COVID. Real Oxford Real Farming Conference. I was in a few sessions on that, and it was just really good. Shame it wasn't in person. We were all looking forward to having a. Oh, Renault's just come back at the wrong time.
The comedy.
I know, he's just arrived. So here on the farm, we have been doing some hedge laying, planting a lot of trees, and we've got some cattle outside, which are bale grazing. Amazing weather for that, and it's gone really well. Some are inside, and I think it's just highlighted the fact that we need to max out where possible on the bale grazing. Sheep have just come in for like 2 months, just less than 2 months before they go out to lamb, and yeah, everything's all right. It's quite a quiet time.
Yeah.
And the chickens are in, which they're not overly chuffed about. But yeah, everything's all right, really. How about you, Lilybet?
I don't know where. I've been up to all sorts. I've been visiting quite a lot of farms recently, so that's been good. But interesting. So some farm business review type. So that's been me driving around the country, talking to farmers about various things. And maybe my dog is in pup, which I'm now terrified about. So we'll see. 3 weeks in.
How long does it take?
Only 8 weeks. Can you believe?
No. Oh, that's the other thing. Yesterday, because we're so on it here, we let the sheep out the shed. Baby lamb there. Yeah, because we're really kind of,
Well, it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
It's very good lamb. Just the one. Anyway, hopefully there's no more.
You never know. Do you know? Have you tracked back when the ram escaped or not?
No, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I'm just hoping there's no more. But anyway, as ever, we've called it. Poppy's named it, and it's called Dougal.
Excellent.
We'll probably die, but yeah. But I'm really looking forward to this because William and Tom came to see us. When was it? About a year ago.
May. Was it May? May. A very windy.
Yeah, it was May.
And they came with 2 mates. One of them wasn't really as keen as you two were. I think he thought you were a bit nuts, which is totally understandable. But what you don't understand about William is he's doing all this farming stuff, but he's also an amazing wood. What do you call it?
It's just wood turning.
Wood turning. So if all else fails, he can be. He gave us this amazing bowl. So William, keep that in your back pocket if it all goes wrong.
Will do.
As ever, excellent start. Right, so we'll make a start, but thanks everybody for joining. As ever, if you have any questions or comments or things you want us to talk about, please enter them into the Q&A and chat, and we'll keep an eye on them as we go through. So first off, if I can come to William to give yourself a little bit of an introduction. So where you currently farm, what you're currently up to, what you're interested in, really.
Right, well, I farm in between Frostley and Woolsnam and Weardale. It's an upland hill farm. Like, we have 400 acres of in-by ground and extensive hill ground where we have 650 rights on Bolliop Common. So we're fairly traditional in the area, but I'm starting to go around with me rotational grazing now and starting to get into that. And I'm looking at a lot of, last year planted my forage crop. I planted a 7 different species forage crop. So that was quite an interesting experiment. And plenty to come in the future, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. And the same really questions for Tom, really.
Really quite a similar system to William. We're an upland and hill farm in Weardale as well, at Towlaw, the upland farm, the hill farms up at St John's Chapel. About 200-ish acres on the upland farm and about 1,600 on the hill farm. Run traditional Swaledale hill sheep, suckler cows, mostly being dairy cross suckler cows, but sort of moving away from that slowly to more of a hardy native Durham shorthorn. And yeah, just sort of the last maybe year, 18 months, started looking same as William, but more at the rotational grazing side of things. Trying to keep stock on grass, trying to keep minimal use of concentrates to where we can. Really, quite difficult when you breed pedigree Leicesters as well. But it's like the same as William, really. Starting to move that direction and trying to plenty to come, I guess.
So can you just explain to us your so the pair of you're good mates, close mates, and you this is going to sound weird now, but these two listen to audiobooks together, don't you? As not together, but separately.
We hold hands and everything.
Do you do like share one of the little like headphones like you used to do when you were 12? Your mate next door.
Yeah.
So you listen to audiobooks separately, and you listen to. Tell the story, Tom, about when you listened to.
I think William got me into it. I blame him. If I'm not wrong, did you not start listening to Harry Potter on the tractor? And then
I'm a big Harry Potter fan. Now I'm going to go red.
And then,
I am also a Harry Potter fan. I've just listened to them again.
I think our entire generation we grew up with it. He told me about listening to audiobooks, so I downloaded a few and started listening, and then it started off being non-farming related things. We're both quite like a little bit of history and stuff as well. So we bit of Second World War history, and then beyond that, I don't really know how we got into realizing there was different types of farming ReGenAg books and things. I guess actually it was probably, I think I downloaded English Pastoral, gave it a listen. When I finished it, I just rang William and said, "You've got to listen to this, because it's just the story of how farms in our area have gone." And he listened to it and rang back and said, "Yeah, God, that was a difficult listen at times, but really good." So,
and that's James Rebanks's book. Yeah.
And in terms of, what do you mean in terms of how farms have gone in your area? How would you describe what's happened?
I listened to that book and I thought he could have just been talking about our farms, really, our family business. I'm fourth generation. My granddad, when he took over the business, probably in the 1930s, we were a small Ayrshire suckler herd, pedigree suckler herd, so Ayrshire dairy herd, sorry, and he was maybe 35, 40 cows. And by the time he left it to my dad and my uncle, we'd gone from sort of 35, 40 cows to 170 suckler cows, continental crosses, big fertilizer applications, going around here, there and everywhere, trying to pick up silage and a bit of rented ground and things. And it was just intensification all the way. We'd done away with the traditional rotations and we were all grass. I can just to say remember when we had turnips and a bit of cereals in and things. And it just went, when headage payments were on as well, stock numbers were through the roof. And I just came away from that book, thought, God, yeah, he could have been talking about our farm. And are we any better off for it, I guess, is the question at the end.
And I suppose from William's perspective, you similar ideas in terms of what the changes that I suppose had a negative impact on some of the farming systems near you?
Well, the thing I didn't really notice until I listened to that book, and then I started paying attention and thinking more, and then you think, maybe we're not quite as well off as we thought we were, considering like the practices we've had to take up. So it's been quite a bit of a roller coaster ride from there till now.
And you went to ground. I mean, I briefly met you in Groundswell last year as well. So you've and you were at Nick's in May. So it's been relatively short, hasn't it, in terms of the adventure?
Yeah, really.
Because you all have both been to college. You went to college?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably didn't.
I went to Harper Adams back in 2012, 10 years.
And it probably didn't feature this type of thing.
No,
didn't?
not really.
No.
No. I was just saying the other day, I remember we had 2 lectures side by side. I think it was maybe in my second year. One was habitat ecology and conservation, because I did ag with environmental management. And the one that followed it was grassland management. And we're talking about ground nesting birds. And I think off the top of my head, it was like the single day in the year where the most grey partridge chicks hatches around the 12th of June or something. And we went straight from that into this other lecture, and they're talking about cutting multiple cut silage. And, you know, when do you cut? Well, the heading date, when's the heading date? Between the 10th and 14th of June, right as the partridge are hatching. And I thought, that's a bit, you know, maybe this is why we're losing. In hindsight, maybe this is why we've lost a lot of farmland birds and things.
So you were already that way inclined or thinking differently 10 years ago, to be fair then? Or
yeah, we've been in environmental stewardship on our farm since 1989. My dad first took us into it then with the original ESA and CSS schemes, and we've been in ever since. So I've always enjoyed that side of the business as well as, well, I say that side of the business. I enjoy I get very bored looking at machinery, but I can stand for 10-15 minutes watching barn owls, basically.
fair enough.
And what about you, William? Have you been kind of herbal, or are you not so? Is it
well, I went to Newton Rig and did me 2 years there, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I had a really good time there. And I really enjoyed the studying at the time. It was quite interesting stuff. But then you kind of look back, and my college education it taught me how to do. You treat that worm with that, you treat that flea beetle with that. And there was never it never taught us how to think why I'm actually getting them problems. And this type of farming is you're trying to looking for the cause rather than treating the symptom, which college, and I don't think any university would teach you anyway at the moment. And I do quite this spring I really enjoyed, like last spring I really enjoyed watching the lapwings hatch out. Yeah, so I've gone totally hemp trousers and sandals.
But do you think it's, as someone said, it's sort of it's a missed generation, isn't it? I'm being grandiose, but actually what is now common farming practice is only actually since the war. Yeah. So a lot of what we are now rediscovering is from a generation ago. It's not that long ago, really, is it? It's just.
No. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, I never really knew my dad or my granddad, but we've got a fellow who works for us, and he's worked for us for 50 odd years now, who, I mean, just saying the changes that happened from my granddad's time, he's seen them from now, and he tells me, you know, he's seen a heck of a lot of changes, and I keep saying you might see a few more in the next few years, actually. But yeah, you're pretty right. It's a misgeneration almost. It's a quite, I don't want to be derogatory, it could be a prescriptive generation.
I think it was also driven by a big upsurge in technology, wasn't it? And technology isn't necessarily a bad thing. Do you mean they were provided different tools? So all of a sudden it was easier, wasn't it?
Yeah. You
didn't have to hand weed a field. You went out and, do you mean you just sprayed it? It was quicker. And so it was part of, there's pros and cons to all of it, isn't it? It was just what was there, and they had the tools available to them all of a sudden. The tools are no longer available because they're not always working currently. We have to think differently. Anyway, I'm on a rant now, sorry. But I think, and also I know William, and I know William's dad from a discussion group I run in County Durham. So I'm always interested in what your dad thinks to this.
His opinion is if he gets paid to do it, he'll do it. But until then, he's sticking with what he knows.
But in terms, he gets paid to do some of that already anyway, doesn't he? Subsidy
yeah, like
wise,
we have quite a decent rotation. Like we grow our forage crop, and then we have some spring cereals undersown with grass. So we do quite a bit already. But like we have a serious addiction to fertilizer, which we are going to have to curtail a bit, definitely.
But do you think that's like this year, that's going to be massively price driven, isn't it? So it's not necessarily an epiphany moment your dad's had. It's more to do with that the price is just not sustainable. But do you think that you're going to use that as a bit of an in, really, to start the momentum?
you know me dad as well as I do. Me and me dad, when we have an argument, it's where the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, and there's a lot of friction in that argument.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a very common thing, and I should think your dad never thought, like 3 or 4 years ago, he probably didn't imagine his son would turn hempy.
No, no, he didn't.
But you've taken it. Is this a good time to talk about the T-shirt you're wearing, William?
Yes, my trip to go and see.
Just a little chat with well, just to put the listeners in the picture. When Liz and I do these chats, we have a little pre-chat before the chat, and sometimes people have told us everything, and then we have to act interested because we're hearing it for the second time. So, but we haven't heard about this, so it's going to be hearing it firsthand. So I'm particularly excited. So tell us, because it's quite radical.
Yeah, well, basically, I applied for Greg Judy's internship, so I emailed Jan, and she sent us the form back, and I filled it out and sent it off. And I didn't hear anything for months and months, and it got to the point where I thought, oh, they're going to have to. I just thought, oh, I should have heard back, so I just emailed it, and I was like, oh, what's happening? Can you give us any feedback? And she was like, oh, right, yeah, you've got through. Do you want to, when do you want to come? And I was like, oh, all right. So I sorted some dates out and booked a flight. So I went away at the end of November, just before that terrible storm hit. So I missed all that. So while all you lot were getting blown away and snowed under, I was sat in Texas pretty comfortable. And then I got a flight out to Missouri, stepped out of the airport, phoned Jan, oh, where you at? Oh, we'll come and get you. And so Greg Judy, who to me is some sort of celebrity, just wanders out and grabs me suitcase, and I'm like, ah! So I get in the car, they take us to dinner, and they got us dinner, and we're just talking about all sorts of bits of things as you do, and he was telling us about how he'd come to where he was, and really interesting fella. And then the next week I spent out there helping him out and learned so much. You'll really enjoy him as a speaker as well. He tells some fantastic story. I tell him he should write a book just about the stories he's been in. He's a really good fella. Yeah.
So when you say you saw some fantastic things, just tell us some of those things.
The first, I got there on the night, and the next morning we went out and moved the cows, and we got to the cows. I was like, oh my God, Greg, your videos do not do justice to how small your cows are. They were nearly like large sheep. They're really small, but they have the most efficient. They had calves on them similar size, and they would be spring-born, and that was and the calves was similar size to the cows. So it was really quite impressive stuff. And it was, and the cows were so having never ever seen me, and me I could go up and scratch a one, insanely tame. Even the bulls were quiet.
So how many was in a mob?
I think there was 344, and I think there was about 40 bulls in that. Now, don't ask me how that breed, and I still can't get my head around it, but that's how he does it, and it does work somehow. Just a really different system.
And they'd be on daily shifts through tall grass.
In the spring, he would do 4 moves and try and cover his farm in 30 or less days to try and keep up with the spring flush. And at the time I was there, they were moving them onto a 3 to 4 acre block twice a day. They were cutting maybe a third of what was there off, and then they'd do another rotation, and then he'd start feeding hay into January, I think. But he only feeds hay for a few months of the year. It's not that long at all.
Wow. So is the idea that just talk about the internship, what it would involve?
Well, it would just involve me going out there for a year and just helping it, being an intern out there and just doing the work and learning. And then I'd get to go to some shows out there as well. So it would be quite an interesting experience, definitely.
So did you tell your dad where you were going?
Yes, yeah, I did tell him this is where I'm off to. It kind of sounds bad because my sister lives out in America, and people were like, "Are you going to go and see your sister?" And I was like, "No, I'm just going to go and see some cows." If actually,
But I suppose the big question, it may not, might not know the answer, but are you going out for a year?
it's all up in the air at the minute. We'll just see what circumstances I'm in come the summer, and then go from there.
I suppose it's an opportunity that you don't necessarily have to take it now, do you? Or is this it? Is this
No,
the only?
like I did ask Greg, and he said he'd be happy to rearrange for another year, depending on my circumstances. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
So you must have impressed him.
I can talk an awful lot of bullshit.
And he appreciated it. So,
oh yes.
So,
and
yeah,
what
so
we should have said also, Greg Judy is booked, isn't he, for Carbon Calling in June? That's the link as well. So the hope is that we'll do a similar chat to this with him, but nearer the event, just to give everybody a bit of a warm up, really.
Yeah. So, that's good. That's good.
So then I suppose the next bit I'm interested in is, I'm quite jealous from a Tom perspective. Sorry, I've gone formal. Tom perspective, you have the most amazing photos on your Instagram account. So you're trying to do, like, you're engaging with people in very different ways, aren't you, at the minute? Or have you been doing that for a while?
I can't take a huge amount of credit for that, actually. Well, I take the photos, but I don't do the Instagram very well. I have to say that's my girlfriend. But yeah,
it's a team approach.
Yeah. I can't even think when it was really. We decided that I'd spoken to a friend of mine who's a chef, and he was, he's a big fan of Dan Barber, and he put me onto his book and things, Third Plate. And he said, do you have any woodland? Would you be interested in doing woodland pork? And I hummed and hawed, and I thought, I was told that when I was very, very young, my dad held me over a pen of pigs at a local show and said, get a good look at them now, but you'll never see these on the farm. And I thought, well, why not? We'll have a go. So I have another friend who has he's got a sour-two for a farm nearby. And I said, you have any piglets? Just some weaners. So got hold of some saddleback weaners, and we've got a little bit of woodland on the farm. So we decided we'd start trying to rear our own woodland pork and learn in the process, I guess. But part of that was, setting up, Instagram for a little bit. Piglets are great content. People love cute little piglets and things, but also you get to see how they ran, how they grow, and ultimately, if you want to, you can buy them at the end. So we did. We provided the chef friend and another chef as well, who got in touch with some woodland pork and sold some to friends, and we've sold some to people we've never met before as well, who saw the Instagram page, really enjoyed it, and came along and bought some. But yeah, we use Instagram to try to engage with people a little bit about how the food's produced, I guess. Before we started making some of the changes we're making now on the farm, I used to joke with my girlfriend saying that on the weekends when we moved the pigs, because we moved them every week into a new piece of woodland pasture, that I'm a degenerative farmer on the weekday and a regenerative farmer on the weekend. I always enjoy going in. William came and saw them as well. We had a bit of chat then, stand and thought, oh, they're quite nice out there as well. They just get to exhibit a bit of pig behaviour, so it's nice to see as well.
And you're at Northern Native, isn't it, on Instagram?
Yeah, at Northern Native Produce, I think. Yeah.
And then, sort of, as your sort of experience with pigs spilled over, so what was then the first thing you did? So was it you focused on the cattle or the sheep, or it was particular areas of the farm? So where was the first step, really?
So I guess from moving the pigs, I decided, I'd never really done an awful lot of rotational grazing before maybe the start of this year. So I decided that we'll just try it. This summer we'll try moving as many ewes and lambs as we can, as many cows and calves as we can on daily moves. And it sort of just spilled over. I guess we just, majority of our stock is native breeds. We're going towards the native breed shorthorn as well, and I guess the spillover is into, eventually we're hoping we can start to market some of our produce, whether it be lamb, beef and pork, all through Northern Native as well. Yeah, we don't really, some of that, I know a lot of people probably think similar as well, but it never really dawned on me that we don't really produce food when we sell it. The point that we sell it's not food. With the way that we produce things, it is effectively a commodity that goes through several businesses before it reaches the consumer. And this way you actually get to speak to people as well, who hopefully keep coming back and buying your produce. So it's quite nice, quite rewarding as well. It sounds quite corny, that, doesn't it? But it's quite rewarding.
And in terms of, and I suppose your future business is driven by adding value that way, or is that what you're aiming to do? So it's also profitable.
So, yeah, I think so, because I guess with the more levels of processing you apply to your product, the more gross value added you retain. So if we're selling a commodity, you might keep 9 pence in the pound, but if you're selling the actual finished article, bacon, sausages, pork chops, you may be starting to keep more like 60, 70 pence in the pound kind of thing. So it's also a way of something, I guess, that something starts off as a sideline could ultimately end up as more of a bigger earner within the business than you initially thought it might. So just time will tell, I guess.
So you're doing the pigs now, and then you're going to try some beef.
Yeah, so we're in second season of the pigs now. We've got 8 more weaners coming along, saddleback weaners. They're in the shed at the moment with the mother. We kept a sow and had her lined and had piglets, and then they're going out next weekend. Actually, that's the plan. Now the weather's been fantastic anyway, but we're getting them out and starting them in the woodland, starting them on their little trip, their journey round. That's the plan, I guess. Pigs again this year, probably a lamb or two, and see if we can do that, and do some shorthorn beast as well, some grass-fed Aberdeen Angus or shorthorn, really, I guess.
And in terms of input, so no fur, no feed. What's your overall plan?
Yeah, so with the pigs, we feed them a small amount, but we try to stick to. I've got a friend who runs a bit of a feed mill as well. And we try to stick to a mix that he does for us of rape meal, sugar beet pulp, and brewer's grains. You've got to get the mix right. You've got to be careful with the rape meal because it can actually have a negative effect on them. But we feed them mostly on that. So it's kind of using byproduct feeds, I guess, from other uses to start with. And then on the beef and sheep, it will be grass-fed. Yeah, fertilizer is thankfully at the price not necessarily required at the moment. It's the plan is to gently wean ourselves off it, probably in a year or two, not over a space of a long period of time, especially at the price it is, I guess. So really this year actually only the ground that will be cutting for a little bit of haylage and silage will get fertilizer, and the rest of it will get a little bit of spring muck. But we're not heavily stocked through summer, because through summer the vast majority of the stock is on the hill farm, on the fells. So it should hopefully allow us to this year build up a good bank of grass through the summer, which will allow us to bring the stock down in sort of November time, and then start to rotate. I've been rotating all of our breeding stock replacements this winter. So anything that's coming in as a breeding female, Swaledales, Leicesters or mules, just as on a daily move at the moment. And I've just about not far off running out of grass now. I think looking at my budget, I might get through to about the 10th of February, but we're a heck of a way through by then. And then onto a bit of hay and see how it goes.
And is that the first time you've done that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've probably got a bit further than I thought with it as well. But having said that, I've picked my battles. I've chosen to move my young stock, which I'm carrying a few more than I would at the moment. We'll be selling some of them next year. But my yows are just being bale fed at the moment.
How are the Swales and Leicesters dealing with this shift in management practice?
I have five swale gimmer lambs, which I know before I get to the field will not be in the fence. And I can almost guarantee there's a big one, a little one, and one with a limpy foot. And I know every time I get there, those 5 are out, and they'll probably not be there next year. I think they might have to go, but the rest of them actually started off 3 strands. I don't think you even need a strand for Leicesters. You can just put them somewhere, and if the sun's shining, they'll just stick their head up and be happy. But yeah, they started on 3 strands. Through summer this year with my fat lambs and my lambs from my muley house, I managed for about a day to get them onto 1 strand. And then they decided they were going to go, and that was it. So they went back up to 2. But yeah, I'm on to 2 strands for most things now, which it saves time, I guess, because it's all on hand reels, really.
And on mains, or how are you running it?
No, on battery at the moment, but I will be starting to try to set up a bit more of a mains infrastructure. I think, Williams, you do mains, don't you?
Yeah, I've put a mains fencer in. Unfortunately, one of the shooters was moving like a pheasant feeder a couple of months ago, and he touched the mains fencer and it put him on the floor, like, and all I was thinking is, go on, man. Imagine if he had a heart attack up there. Can you imagine the paperwork?
But you both seem to have got to grips with the rotational thing quite quickly.
Whether we're doing it right or not is a different matter. I think there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
But do you find that it's quite addictive?
Oh God, yeah.
So tell us about that. Like, so maybe some people who are listening are just on the ding dong with rotational grazing. Just sell it. How does it make you feel?
Go on, Tom.
We've both agreed that the nicest part of the day is, in the summer, 7 o'clock in the morning, sun's just getting up and getting nice and warm, and you're moving your cows into the new piece, and they'll hear you coming if you're on a quad bike or anything. The odd day we're really busy in somewhere, I give them a bigger break, and you go past the quad bike and they're stood there blaring at you because they're ready to move and things. It is really quite, I suppose it's sort of addictive. Yeah, it is nice being able to go, or at the moment, nice sunset on an evening when you're moving your gimmer hogs and things. It's nice. It doesn't take a lot of time. People think it takes an awful lot of time, but I used to go around feeding 300 swale gimmer hogs a bite of cake every day, and it takes no more time to do setting up a new piece of ground for them than it did doing that. So it's saving a lot of money as well. You'll
have saved quite a bit this year, I would think, of you already.
Yeah.
And William, how does your dad take to
being mean about him? But
no, I think no. Does he like it?
Well, the thing is, he just kind of lets us get on. He gives us autonomy on that type of thing. Just get on. I'm not bothered. But the thing is, because I've built up a nice wedge of grass, he's like looking at it jealously, thinking, you need some sheep up there. And I'm like, don't you dare fetch me any more stock. I've worked my ass off to build that wedge of grass up. So he like looks at it quite jealously, I think. But it's the most satisfying thing. It took us, I think, 3 hours on a Sunday to set me fences up for a week. And then 15 minutes each morning. And you see all your cattle every day. And you can pick out anything that's just slightly not right. Not a problem. It really is a no-brainer. It's satisfying to see them fresh shoots coming up a couple of days later. And you just tell you're doing something good.
Yeah. And how is go on.
I'm just thinking, are you moving more to taller pastures, or what you're thinking in terms of rest periods for that grazing?
It's kind of, because we've got that much stock on, I can't build up that real tall grass. I can get it to like 10 inches of leafy stuff, but I can't get to like a 60-day rest period yet. Well, I did on one part of my farm last year. We have an allotment that I got to a 60-day rest period, and there was things popping up in there I'd never seen. There was even plantain popping up that I'd never ever seen before, because it'd always been set stocked. And I think there was even some vetches popping, like, you know, really things I'd never seen before. So there's a lot of potential in it, but being able to build up enough grass to give yourself that 60-day rest, I think you just need a lot less stock.
Yeah, we've got fields that we've been in for nearly 10 years. We've been in ELS on the upland farm, and we've no reseeding with that. And we've got, you know, when you give the pastures a bit longer, you know, we haven't been a very heavy fertilizer inputs anyway, but give a good rest. You can't believe the diversity and native species of plants and vetches and things that start coming through. It's really interesting to see. So it'd be interesting to see how it, you know, goes in the next few years, where we try and give good rest periods through summer before, you know, a bit heavier stocking through winter. And it's just the way that the farms are 3 miles apart, and the cows at the moment come down sort of mid-October and go straight to a shed. The idea will be a few hardier, you know, cows, probably a few less numbers as well, come down from the hill at the start of November, and then just rotate outside for as long as possible, weather permitting. And if needs be, we'll house still, but try and make winter as physically as short as possible, because winter's the expensive time for suckler cows. And
what's your soil type on that lower farm?
Interspersed sandstone and clay. So within the field, nice. we can have clay veins go through the middle of really nice dry areas as well. So we're incredibly dry at the moment, but we can be very wet in certain areas, certain fields. So it's picking battles really. We're definitely not infiltrating enough water as well. We've always traditionally cut most fields on this farm. We've probably done quite a lot of damage with compaction over the years. So it'd be interesting to see whether we can start to alleviate a bit of that with longer covers. Might not necessarily be able to do it through that. Might need to go towards something like rip and drip and see how we can get on with that. But whether stewardship will allow that or not, yet to be seen.
Just explain rip and drip, please.
Right, I got that term from Nicole Masters from her book, and to what I understand, it is mechanical intervention, subsoiling, but also when you've made this intervention and broken up compaction, dripping compost teas or extracts or vermicast extract into the openings that you've left behind in order to kickstart the biology of the soil, to get the soil to react. Because if you just rip it and leave it, eventually it'll just go back to how it first started.
So that's sort of one of your aims, is to sort of investigate that and how it could work on some of your land.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Have you done any testing of sort of bacteria fungi ratio or anything, biological activity currently?
No, not yet. No, I haven't, if I'm honest. No.
And organic matter, I suppose, is generally quite high because of its background.
Yeah, it'll be from the regular soil tests, it's been pretty high because we've just stocked it for years and years and years.
And sort of we started going, you listened to James Rebank's book, but also some of this has come from necessity, hasn't it, in terms of what might be with subsidy going. So I don't know whether you want to talk about sort of how you think it might help in terms of the sort of sustainable future of your farm, really, or either from a Tom or a William perspective. How do you think this will help sort of help you deal with reduction in subsidy? That's a horrible question. I think basically, obviously, there's cash coming into the farm that will no longer be coming into the farm. Is this going to help bridge that gap, or not so much?
If we probably started listening to more of these type of books about November last year, when I remember it was the sudden realization with the Path to Sustainable Farming policy document being released that, oh God, this is happening. And I mean, we get a decent whack of subsidy, which we won't get in 8 years' time. And William and I sort of spoke to each other and went, wow, this is going to be interesting. So yeah, I think when you start to listen to some of the books, Gabe Brown's Dirt to Soil and Greg, some of it comes out of the necessity or a big impact that's happened in their life. And I suppose I don't think it's a coincidence that we are going to be losing 4 years of subsidy before anything is presented, anything of materials presented with elms, whether it is or isn't. I think there is an element of wanting to give the industry a bit of a shake from DEFRA and see how the market reacts. And I think that's what pushed us, or pushed me in that sort of direction, because it wouldn't work without subsidy in the current system. So it was if we know that the status quo won't work, what might work? And we're designing a bit of a system now and starting on the path to achieving it that might stand in better stead to keep us going. So I don't know what you think, William.
Well, just the fact that the money is gone, and when you kind of look vaguely at your accounts and you see machinery and fertilizer and seeds as one of your biggest inputs, you think, can I try to cut that down? And that kind of leads you to this. So hopefully it will help, but I really don't know if it's feasible to expect to survive in this type of area. We'll just have to say, I'm just going to do my best to try and work around the problems that come as they come. And I'm hoping this type of farming will help.
Well, I guess the other option is that there's quite a lot of chat at the minute about people trying to farm their way out of it, as in just go hell for leather on production. But what are your thoughts on that? So I don't know if any of your neighbours or...
I managed to buy half the farm off my uncle in 2019 and immediately did what probably everyone does, right? We're going to see what boundaries we can push, put more cows on the ground, more sheep on the ground, and very, very quickly, within 18 months, realised that actually we're selling more carbs with more cost for less money, and realised that actually, we're being outrun by the cost without the subsidy. I think every farm probably has its, what I call sort of a natural carrying capacity, what it could carry without any form of input. And it's trying to match up that capacity with the ability to pay the overheads effectively, and also stewardship agreements in future. That's where I see our future being anyway, trying to find that balance.
I just see subsidy is the vast majority of our profit, and it's just our toy box acquisition fund.
Yeah.
And you've really got to try and wean yourself off that as best you can.
And I think it is. I think the interesting bit is that farmers have the opportunity to, as you change the practices and do that. But I think it's the allied industries. Do you mean it is the machinery dealers? It's the first. Do you mean it's that? That's the bit where subsidy moves from the farmers and it's paid to the farm and very quickly leaves to pay for something else. So I do think the vast majority of they'll have to, or they will do, but will survive without it. It's what the surrounding industry will start to look like.
Yeah, I didn't get a calendar from our rep this year, so
It's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope.
Calendar in January is a bill.
So that's but I think it's also, but you can start to see it shifting, can't you, now? So instead of selling pesticides, they're now selling biological stimulants, or do you mean so they're picking up on trends of what people might be interested in?
Yeah, Bayer retweeted Soil Association earlier on Twitter. Not how that works.
Which, yeah, and so and whether we're biased, but there's definitely a shift, isn't there, in terms of attitude, and it's happened definitely in the last few years, and mainly subsidy and other things. And I think we've also got to pick up the fact is that with your barn owl spotting, or it's about a happier way of living, isn't it, or how you spend your time. So what's the sort of dream day for you in the future?
It can't be too rude. It's got to be clean.
Yeah, probably just not running around putting out fires. And I have to say I borrowed that term from William, because we both do that. I ring him and say, what you've been up to? Just running around putting out fires. And it's just, the constantly something going wrong with machinery, or you've got sheep's feet to see to. Ideally, you'd be able to carry a sensible level of stock where you're not continually having to do stock work all the time, but you can rotate them, move them. Still get a bit of diversity in your job. You'll be able to do a little bit of tractor work here and there because it is quite refreshing to have a little change from time to time, but not just relying on constantly having to, where's the next input coming from, or sounds like a drug addict. Where's the next fertilizer hit coming from? And just generally be maybe not as busy as well. I mean, I think that's probably an element of it, a bit of a lifestyle and things. So
to be able to take a weekend off and not feel guilty as because you're not doing work at home, and to be able to make a reasonable living from it, that's all I want.
That's the thing. I think, you look back, I look back at people, I've got some diaries and things, and you look back at what they did here and there in the day, you write down what they've done and stuff, family members, and they'll have just potted around, hoed the turnips and things, very cold days, did some paperwork in the afternoon or something like that. And you think, yeah, now we're flying around doing all sorts. We're working an awful lot hard. I speak more generally in the industry, we're probably working more and more now than we were and have been for any previous generation in terms of time input. And we're not really any better off. We're still relying on subsidy. So hopefully this will change that maybe.
And do you think if you hadn't, in comparison to where you were maybe 2 years ago, how is your opinion and enthusiasm for the future changed? Like if someone said you've got to farm conventionally forever, you've got to keep on going, would you say that's fine, or are you pleased with? I mean, how do you find the change mentally? Have I made sense?
I think I definitely. It'd be probably harder to do it continually more convention. Now it's a Pandora's box. Once you've opened it, you can't go back. It's the Matrix blue pill. You can't.
It's a good level of analysis there for covering a range of generations.
You can't go back when you've seen it, and that's the thing. Once you realise that, oh God, what you previously, and this is maybe a level of this farms maybe don't know or haven't caught up or haven't gotten. It's no slight on anyone's behalf for that. Some of the things you do are far more damaging than you realise, and once you realise how damaging they are, you don't want to do them anymore.
So it's a one-way street, isn't it? Basically, you're not going back.
Yeah, you can't really. It'll be very difficult applying. It was very difficult applying fertilizer last year. It'll be equally as difficult for the small amount I'll use this year, knowing the impact it has and ultimately the impact it's having, I guess, generally on, environments and ecosystems and things as well. I guess there is an element of that as well. Once you realise actually some of these practices are contributing towards climate change and global warming, you don't really want to do that as well when you look at the prevailing science of where we're headed. And
Nick mentioned you visited with a couple of your friends, and as we've talked before, which is one of them has sort of gone backwards. Or do you think? I
think he's on the call as well. So
I wasn't going to name him. You've now said he's somewhere in the participants. And I suppose it's part of that question, which is, I encounter it a few times, which is, do you think people are actually have the capacity to do it? That's what I mean. So there will be a massive amount of change needed in the next 5 years. What proportion of the people that your generation, your mates, are ready for it or are able to do it?
The thing is with this, you actually realise how little you know, and then it's must be like being at base camp of Everest, and you look up and you've got that much work to do to learn about it. It's a lot to take in and think about. It was a lot easier just to ban chemicals on the ground. to solve your problems. Like there's a huge learning curve in this type of farming.
That's what keeps you interested as well.
Yeah, true.
I mean, for me, I say, I guess I'm in the James Rebank school of thought. There's a middle ground between new-ish practices that are actually rehashed old practices in some cases, as well as keeping a traditional rural fabric as well, based around certain events, breeding stock and sales and things, and also managing biodiversity, ecosystems and wildlife and things as well, because that's the added layer for me, is that doing what I'm doing, I know that I am helping to, or trying to help, some of the most endangered bird species and water vole, etc., in the country and things now for future generations, I guess. So if that doesn't sound too cheesy.
So it's that idea of you. I suppose it's feeling like you're part of a bigger thing, aren't you? It's not just about your cows or your sheep. It's it's an active part in building a better bit of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think from where you're like, well, you're probably nearly 20 years younger than me, and I think you've got, when you plant a tree, Tom William, you'll see it when it's a big tree. When I plant a tree, it's going to still be quite an average tree, hopefully by the time I get to 80, fingers crossed. So I think you're so lucky that you've got this now, and then you've got your whole farming career to kind of go for it. So another question. So we talked about this earlier, but what do you do that your neighbours probably think he's gone a bit weird? And I'll give you an example. So one of our neighbours caught Reno harvesting wild plantain and seeds on the verge at the bottom of the road. And there was quite a few swear words, as in, what the hell are you doing now? And he just couldn't believe that, Reno should be a busy farmer. And he was there with a plastic bag putting grass seeds into it. I don't think it was even a Sunday either. It was just a normal day. So what can you tell us about that?
Do you have one, William? I've got one if you want to go.
Well, it's just the fact I was moving, putting my cows onto daily shifts, and then one of the people we get straw off, an arable farm, came into the yard, and it was like, "Oh, what you doing there?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just moving cows." And he was like, "Oh, right, okay." And I was explaining to him what I was doing, and then he went to me mate who we laid straw with and just said, "He's talking a lot of shit, him." So from then on, I thought, I'm not going to explain to people what I'm doing.
Yeah, I get that as well. I'm just going to move cows again. Yes, every day. Yes, every day. But another one that I've found, well, two things. One of them, and I think he's on the call as well, but a neighbour of ours who was ahead of us on the curve. About maybe 3 years ago, I was looking at him putting cows into back then I would have thought he should be cutting that field. That field looks like it's getting away on him. And now, like 2 or 3 years later, I'm doing exactly the same. And people say, "Are you not cutting that?" No, that's what I want it to be that long. I want them to trample it. Well, it's wasted. It's wasted. But the really crazy one is, I found that I might have found a use for a blue-faced Leicester in the future. Because if you spray enough molasses on dockens and thistles, they will eat them. So I was going around spot spraying dockens, just so the Leicesters would follow me at the smell of the molasses, and they'd go and eat the docken and eat the thistle.
There you go. I think it's an interesting marketing angle.
You won't see that. I don't think you'll hear that in the Leicester for a while.
I don't think you will. Liz, Jim Beery has asked you a question which is quite long.
It's to do with my statement apparently is that what farms will survive without subsidy. I have a naive belief that most beef and sheep farmers to have a need or have a willingness to survive. That's the challenge. It's what that survival looks like, I think. And in my opinion, it's the farms I go and see, yes, they are challenged when subsidy is removed, but there's worse farms, aka arable farms, where they'll be more challenged by the removal of that subsidy, and you can see if we've seeing here, we can see a shift in practices on some beef and sheep farms within 2 years from where they are to where they might need to be. Arable farmers, I don't see the speed that they can move, that they can deal with it, but in my opinion.
Especially when they have to, then when they could be potentially paying for the carbon that they're using to produce what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of it is, not that I'm going to be mean about arable farmers, but I mean, we've talked a bit about machinery and overheads, but beef and sheep farmers pale into insignificance in terms of what machinery costs we have to cover. There is a question actually about overhead. So obviously we've talked a bit about reducing variable costs, so feed and fur, but we've talked about machinery costs. So have you got ideas of how to reduce your overheads? So are you thinking selling machinery, or I suppose it's more at the moment linked to Tom's view, but what's your plans of overheads?
Yeah, so we're quite lucky in that when we cut stock numbers to what I think the farmers can comfortably carry, we'll still have a fairly viable number of stocks. So we'll be 400 sheep and 35 suckler cows, plus a fairly decent stewardship agreement as things stand now, and hopefully what we're expecting with elms. But yeah, the main cost areas to cut will be probably labour and machinery. Machinery is a big one. Cutting, the need for however many tractors and a baler and things, using contractors who are 10 a penny on the doorstep, and just generally trying to cut down the need for. I mean, we'll do 1,600 bales of silage a year for cows and sheep and things, and haul them from one farm to another to try to keep sheep on a hill and things through harsh winters, and it's all very expensive. It requires mechanical inputs, and that comes from machinery and fertilizer and things. So the idea being the stock, I suppose, the idea we're going to follow is the stock will more of a traditional nomadic pastoralist type system. They'll be on the hill through summer, allowing the upland farm to be rested, and to, there'll still be a nominal amount of stock to keep trampling around to try and keep the growing stages correct. And if things go to head, then we'll have to address that, but then bring everything down just at the start of winter and try to utilize what's left. So effectively, very, very, historic systems, it's just nomadic pastoralism, up in summer, down in winter, and try to do that. Whereas previously we'd just be cutting a heck of a lot of grass and wrapping it in plastic and using fertilizer to grow more grass and things. So yeah, machinery, labor, and fossil fuel inputs as well, expensive things.
I suppose the challenge back is that you might need a forklift or a loadle, but reality is you need a slightly lower powered one or an older one, and you're using it for fewer hours. So you might not necessarily cut machinery completely, but it's about repairs or fuel that you'll also help reduce.
Yeah, making current machinery last longer as well, putting fewer hours through it.
Okay. And we never quite came back to William's self-proclaimed fertilizer addiction, which is, I'm interested in how that's going to be satisfied this coming season. Or have you got a shed full already?
Dad bought some, I think it was in November, and he bought it for some nitrogen for £465 a ton. And I said, "You absolute idiot, what have you done that for?" 2 months later, I claimed he was a genius. So that's what 2 months can do. We've just bought some more for 670, another 13 ton for 670, and he just, we'll just pay less tax this year. That's his idea anyway. So he's just bought it. But I am going to trial some. I was listening to a podcast. Michael Blanche did an interview of Jamie Leslie, and Jamie Leslie was mixing urea up in a spray and putting, I think, 10 kilos to the acre on, like foliar applied, which could be, I'm going to do a trial to see if that works quite as well, because quite a lot of your nitrogen does just leach away. Trying to be a bit more efficient with it. I'm going to try to anyway, because I can't cut off over 1 year. I am going to have to fight the battle of my dad and then fight the battle with the fertilizer.
I sound like I had a chat with someone about foliar today, and
Yes.
their top tip was it probably will reduce 50% of your fertilizer over time, but in the first year it might drop your granular by 20 to 30%.
Right.
But you can't rely on foliar to do all of your nitrogen.
Right.
So there's something definitely interest in there, but it might not reduce the granular use completely. But I think there's bits also about using that technique to put other biological active or carbon in to act as a fuel source. So there's quite a lot of interesting bits in it that are wider than just whacking on nitrogen in a different way from a foliar perspective. But certainly the work that Jamie's done, and there's a bit more from Farm Connect in Wales, has shown some interest. It's now trying to work out how we can get it onto farm and working well, really. So yeah, a lot of the techniques have come from Hort and through arable and now heading into grassland. So yeah, it's definitely some interesting ideas, but yeah, with caution. Certainly it's not going to do a full replacement.
I might end up doing smaller and more frequent applications for what I've got to do. Yeah,
and a lot of, it's about choosing those fields, isn't it, as well? So those fields that are in the ideal growth stage, in terms of with productive grasses, all of those things, it's going to be very strategic use this year to make sure it is being used as effectively as it can be.
And I have bought an extensive amount of electric fencing this time, so everything's going to be put into a rotation. So hopefully I'll grow a lot more grass with that.
Just on that, Jimmy Stobbart has put on here, I think it's to every, isn't it? It's just to us, I think, Liz. Jimmy Stobbart has got he knows someone with an ATV with a wrapper fencing unit for sale.
So we've become eBay.
Yeah. So
flog your shit on carbon calling.
We'll have a notice board, but he might want it gone before then.
Start the bidding at.
So yes, if anybody wants electric fencing. So yeah, so you
contact Jimmy.
So it's that the challenge we've got with the high fertilizer price. It's made people shift really quick, hasn't it? Or potentially, but as you say, you're weaning yourself off it and you're adding in more fencing and more rest period to see how you get on. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
So there's you two, team William and Tom, and if you got anyone else locally who is kind of on the turn?
Well, as I said before, I think he's on the call as well. Our neighbour, my direct neighbour and good friend of Williams, is probably 4 or 5 years ahead of us. Slightly different type of farm, more direct drilling and arable, but integrated livestock and things. Other than that, the Weardale branch of the cult's quite scarce at the moment.
Is it? So and so just the cult, but is there anything that they would make that shift easier for them, or what's stopping them, or what do you think is the main
barrier?
You're getting out of your comfortable zone.
Yeah, nothing worth learning happens in your comfort zone.
No.
And a lot of people are happy doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And also, I think, well, for us, it's that fine. We had to do something different because there was a financial need to. And Tom, you're probably the same.
Yeah.
And I guess if you haven't got that, it's quite like, why make your life hard learning something else? It's like learning a foreign language, isn't it? I suppose.
We were at a meeting. When would it be? Maybe last October, November, and we were giving a run through of the agricultural transition plan and an update from our NFU rep, and one of the farmers was saying, well, this is ridiculous, why aren't we out protesting and things? And he just said, the time for that was 6 years ago. This is happening. Get your head into gear. This is what's going to happen. You can't farm until you run out of credit. So I think eventually I think there will have to be an external pressure on a lot of farmers to help them change. And that's pretty much the position I'll be in, probably a bit closer, probably similar to you, Nick, probably a bit closer than some other farms. Some other farms are quite happy and quite comfortable, and they'll kick on until the day that they realise that they are close to farming out of credit. And will it be too late? It might be too late for some, who knows?
Also, potentially they're not accessing accounts, are they? Do you mean that the generation of sort of 20-year-olds, do you mean if they're in a generational business, do you mean even their mum and dad equivalent might not be accessing the account depending on how that business is structured? So it's also a level of knowledge, isn't it? From it's asking difficult questions within potentially a family business, which we all know is not always easy.
And also it's having that conversation of, I don't want to have to work every weekend, or I don't want to spend all weekend feeding cows.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a lot of chat at the minute about mental health, and I think it's lots of people just probably have lived farmed a certain way all their lives, and they kind of expect the next generation to be happy to take that on.
Yeah.
And I went to see a farm recently, and they used the point which is about there's two bits to inherit, isn't it? There's a business and there's assets, and the assumption always is that everything goes to the next generation. But he was debating whether actually doing the business, if the next generation aren't quite ready for it, do you mean it's how you divvy up some of that? The expectation's always there, but this is the time where that expectation isn't fair, is it? There might not be a viable business to pass on in 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, that could be right as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I guess I know of examples of farms whereby maybe things are passed on too late, and it kiboshes any sort of enthusiasm that the next generation have. And once you've been past the enthusiasm stage, it's quite hard to resurrect it, I guess. There could be an element of that in the changes and things as well.
You just have to look at some of the meetings you go to, like the young people there, like there's not many at all. And then you look across one side of the valley and you can point to a lot of farms that don't have anyone interested. Now, is that a symptom of the system we're in? Because it's not I don't think it's that enjoyable in a conventional system. Sometimes it's sometimes it's pretty stressful.
Yeah. There's a question come in. Have you seen any benefits to animal health since starting rotational grazing?
Typically we lose a few cows with staggers every year, and last year I didn't lose one with staggers, which is like a totally different thing to happen. But as for I need to get me finger out and start doing fecal egg counts and better monitoring that type of thing, and then I could definitely say that I still had to worm me lambs, so I don't know, but if I can get one pass with cows and then the next pass with sheep, or have the sheep first and then the cows following, there's potential there to get rid of your parasites, I think, or the vast majority of them.
Yeah. How about you, Tom?
I'd probably cut out at least a wormer use on my fat lambs this year, and I think I'll probably have managed to cut out another wormer on my gimmer hogs before they go back to the hill farm as well. And I mean, maybe not a health benefit for them, but they're as fit as they would have been if I was feeding them cake. So I suppose it's a like for like benefit, and I've saved a lot of money. So.
And there's no motivational chat from Fergus down in Kent, I think directed towards William, which is basically sell the fert. Good luck with that. But in terms of sell that fert and then doing buy hay, increase stocking density.
If I sell the fert, I think I'll be disinherited.
What you do, sell the furt, get on a plane to America. You've gone for a year.
Yeah.
He won't. He will still remember, to be fair, when you're back.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I think sell a furt, buy hay. I think hay is one of the most undervalued commodities in agriculture. The time and effort it takes, and the sun gods having to smile. Yes, you can get some very bad hay if you buy it, but people can sell bales of hay cheaply. You might as well buy them, because the time and effort and fertilizer and things that goes into it is I don't think it's always reflecting the value of hay. That's a sideline, sorry.
No, but I think it is interesting because there's a lot of systems. Do you mean it went out of fashion and it's now people want more hay now coming into bale grazing systems and all sorts. But yeah, and a lot of the time, if you fully cost it, you can buy it in cheaper than what it would.
Well, that's what I think, because I've got a certain amount of bales I'll need to produce a year in order to keep the stock I want to keep. It's a lot less than it was. Doesn't warrant keeping a tractor and a baler now, but also I've sort of worked out the right price. It's better for me to just allow what would have been cut for hay to be grazed and stockpiled, and buy the hay in. It's a double win. You're keeping more grass for stockpiling, and you're also still have the hay.
And bringing fertility
on the machines up, and simple.
Question from Chris is about herbal lays. Are you trying to introduce diversity into any of your lays? Either of you? William, you were doing some, but you're doing
we've done herbal lays before, but like it just reflected in me ignorance at the time. We didn't rotationally graze it and wondered why everything disappeared. But we will be putting more herbal layers in, and if we get a new stewardship, I'll try to up that hectarage, and we'll rotate it better.
Okay.
It definitely works on fat lamb. Like, it's fantastic stuff for fat lambs.
And on that note, Chris, if you put the herbal lays in, I'll provide the sheep. Chris is the one who's right next door. We won't be looking, I suppose, at that, because I'm probably more in the permanent pasture, native sward kind of area at the moment, and trying to, I suppose that's part of stewardship as well for us. We've not been in any rotations with herbal lays, but I'm quite enjoying seeing what comes through naturally as well, actually.
And we have to remember that the herbal lay is trying to recreate what you're finding, aren't you, in terms of what species are returning after you're grazing it slightly differently.
Yeah.
I think we need to read the rest of Fergus's message.
Yeah, I was one of the ones who used to laugh at him, so I'm not sure I should. So the full message is...
I didn't realise there was a bit of history between you.
So sell furt, buy hay, increase stocking rate and density to build up fertility for the future. The clover will come. Hardcore mob grazing advice from Kent. They used to laugh at us. I never used to laugh. He was probably himself and David were one of the first people to really be doing it on a serious scale. And so it stretched our normal thinking a few years ago, 10 years, probably 12 years ago.
And can Fergus just let us know where he learned from?
He will.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll get him on next. He'll be on one of these soon. So I'm just, I suppose, in terms of the last sort of 5-10 minutes, really, in terms of you've talked a few times about podcasts and books, and so in terms of on our standard, we always think we should do a librarian selection or section. What are your favourite books or references, or what would you go to in terms of encouraging people to look at?
God, there's so many. My favourite one would probably Dirt to Soil's a solid, like, it's not hard. It's like quite a good listen.
It's read by Gabe as well. If you're going to listen to it, it's
yeah,
like talking to you. Same with Full of the Soil by Nicole Masters. That's the same. She reads it as well, so it's just like a chat. It's really in depth. You probably have to buy that as well to reference it, because it's quite, you'll never take it all in if you listen to it 3 times.
Yeah, me and Tom both bought the book so we could go and look back through it.
I enjoyed Wilding by Isabella Tree because it just a completely different perspective, and that was more on the nature and environmental side of things. Slightly outside of farming, but really useful, is Matthew Syed's books, Rebel Ideas and Black Box Thinking. And they're just about how you perceive things and, diversity of thought and stuff like that, which is quite interesting.
Didn't you talk about, it might be someone different, donut economics?
Yeah.
By Kate Raworth.
Who was? Yeah. What was the story there? Because you said that was good.
Oh God.
No, is it good? Is it worth
yeah,
a
it
look
is.
at?
Yeah, it's really good about talking about living within planetary boundaries and how
It's quite complex.
Yeah, that whole economic model of the foundation of our capitalist system is fundamentally going to have to change if we want to continue living. It is quite deep and quite complex, but it's like talking about growth and everyone hell-bent on just growth without any thoughts about what this impact might have on, as we're now starting to see, on the environment or biodiversity crisis and things like that. Yeah, it is really, it's a little bit scary, but then it starts to talk about natural capital and people's perception of natural capital as well, and how when you start to value things, the way in which people act or the way in which people perceive them changes. And that's, partially some of my worry with the move towards private finance in natural capital. Because if you start funding something, the relationship people have with it changes. Is it a value or is it a price, effectively? It is interesting. It's worth it. It does tune into sort of the more regenerative sort of mindset as well, which is quite interesting.
Go on, Liz.
No, I'm just in sort of expanding on that a bit in terms of that idea of, so you don't necessarily think of your farm as a carbon source or carbon sink, or are you sort of watching with delight that what could be the potential of those carbon markets for your particular landscapes?
I am incredibly standoffish on that matter at the moment. It's if it's there and it's sensible, it's a bonus. But if it isn't, it won't matter, because I think the elephant in the room for a lot of farms is they need to be carbon neutral themselves first. And if they're not carbon neutral, and it will come eventually, there will be policy eventually where businesses have to be net zero carbon neutral, and a lot of farms won't be. That was another book that we read, is Dieter Helm's Green and Prosperous Land, and that was
net zero.
Yeah, and net zero. That was scary. But Green and Prosperous Land, William and I went, oh God, that is interesting. Some of it's a bit inflammatory towards farmers, but it laid out the three key principles that you can clearly see now: polluter pays, net biodiversity gain, and public money for public goods. They're the three things that it's quite obvious we're starting to follow. And when it comes to polluter pays, that is effectively, if you're using carbon, you will have to pay for the use of that carbon. So that affects everyone.
So in terms of we can't sell it and make some cash because we might need it ourselves.
Yeah.
If we continue to run some of the systems.
Systems will need to buy it in.
Well, the thing is, with that sort of when you're selling off your carbon to the likes of Burger King, they really need to be incentivized to cut their carbon footprint instead of shooing the problem onto someone else. Like, where's the incentive to make them reduce that carbon footprint when they can just buy it off?
I suppose the incentive comes from profit, doesn't it? So they don't want to be spending as much money on an offset.
In the 90s, Michael Jordan was sponsored by Nike, and he wore Nike high top shoes to play basketball in, week out for the Bulls. And every time he did it, he got a fine. Nike paid the fine and continued to do it because they were earning more in revenue from him wearing Nike high tops, basically. So I don't think that'll de-incentivize rather people and businesses. They'll just pay it. It's just a cost built into their business strategy and the business model.
I think it also comes from a point where at the moment it's a massive marketing battle, isn't it? It's about it's basically a race to who's the first person to be carbon zero, and it's not about necessarily changing practices, it's about offsetting.
Yeah.
So I do think it's got to be something about the proportion of that you can offset. So there's got to be limits that you can't do. It's just a greenwashing type tendency, isn't it? You can't just, it's absolution. It just doesn't, it can't work like that. Well, it can do what it wants. I can't. I don't think it should work like that.
Fergus has just replied, another book for you, chaps, Carbon Fields by Graham Harvey. Who
is the advisor onto the Archers, or was.
Oh.
Yeah, I've read that actually. It is really good, that one.
And he was really, it was really early days. Definitely, he was, yeah. So that's how that started. Jim's just asked a few questions in terms of Gene, and there's a relevance in terms of it makes us feel warm and fuzzy that we're doing the right thing for the world. But actually, are you measuring things? Are you getting to the outcomes of what you're doing?
Need to start.
Yeah, need to start as well.
Okay, and where do you think you might start?
We've been measuring biodiversity. So, in partnership with the likes of the Game Wildlife Conservation Trust, we can see that our farmland bird numbers have skyrocketed in the last sort of 10, 15 years. But on the more soil orientated things and carbon, I'm be fairly confident that we would be carbon neutral as it is. We will be audited this year, I think. But monitoring is probably one of my weaker areas at the moment.
I'm getting some baseline surveys done in the spring on some land I'm putting into a mob grazing system, so we'll just find out.
And but if anyone soil baselines,
soil and wildlife.
Okay.
I think this is the kind of research we need, isn't it? When someone like you's really changing their system, it would be good, because I know Newcastle University are starting to look more at this, at what research they can do. And wouldn't it be great if they just rocked up and said, we'll do your baselines?
If anyone knows where I can get a Haney soil test done in the UK as that would be much appreciated.
Because I know they're doing I'm involved in the mob grazing project that DEFRA funding and ADAS are running, and it would be interesting, or I can get the methodology that's being used through that. So at least it allows you to compare with other farms as well. But that comes at, all of that comes at a cost, doesn't it? In terms of your time, the analysis, and all sorts of things. Plus what the hell we do with the numbers. But
I've got some pretty interesting trial work I'm going to do this spring on some rough allotment ground. I've bought some automatic fence lifters from Argentina, like they lift an electric fence. So my plan is to get huge animal impact on some parts of the farm and see what that effect has on rough, reshy ground, just to get that huge animal impact down and see what happens.
You need to have a chat with Fergus. Right. So how do they work though? Because I've seen the ones that are timed. They unclip themselves on a timer. But do these have got a mechanism of
these are just you sit a rod in the ground and you sit it on top and you just put in a time on it and it just lifts the wire up and lets out a couple of beeps and the cattle move on. So I'm wanting to. Well, I was working out. I can if I get them in a tight enough place, I think I can get 250,000 kilos to the acre on like a small patch of ground and move them 5 times. I've got 4 lifters, so I can put them into 5 different bits. So that'll be interesting. I'll get some good videos as well of that.
Interesting. And how did you hear about the Argentinian fence lifters?
It was
like some sort of euphemism. I do apologize.
it was on a podcast. They're from a firm called Pens Agro, and they're really good to deal with. So I messaged them on. I just emailed them. I says, do you have a firm in the UK? And they're like, no, we've never shipped anything to the UK. So I was like, well, just give us a price. And they said, all right, it's going to be this, and the shipping. I was like, okay, send them across. So I just PayPal'd them across, and I was just like, I do hope I'm going to get some fence lift. And it was a real worry because we were on clipping at the Fell and I got a phone call off FedEx saying they need some sort of import license for them, otherwise they were going to send them back. So I had to rush home like on the night and go and do an application. Yeah, I'm an expert on importing stuff from Argentina. So if ever you need a hand, give us a shout.
You might end up being their agent. You never know.
I know you'll be like Tim, what Tim is to Cactus Tree Guards. Just sole agent.
Well, if anyone's interested, give us a shout. I've got a good relationship with a bloke out there.
So we've sold cactus guards, we've sold fence lifters, and we've sold an electric fencing kit. So there you go.
Jimmy will export his wrapper to Argentina.
That's the sort of trade deal Boris would be proud of.
Dave uses bat latches. Not sure. Anyway, I'll connect you with Fergus. You can have a chat about animal impact and how they do. Yeah, they've done some things with fences in terms of getting them to move relatively automatically.
Well, I think we need to get Fergus and Dave, whoever Dave is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just conscious of time, so thanks very much, William and Tom, for your time. Thanks everybody for the questions. So the plan, I suppose, Nick, what is the thing you've taken from this evening? And I'll think of mine when you're answering.
Well, I think if I could put money on these two, I was going to call them stallions. These two racehorses, I would say. I would say they're going to go far, and I predict that they will be the next. I'm just going to embarrass someone on the call, but they will be the next Angus Nellis, and probably Fergus, who I've never met, but I think they probably will be. I think they will be leaders of the regen revolution. I think it's amazing what they've done, and I love the way they read the books. I love the way they've created their own little huddle, and I just wish that I was their age and I had all that time to watch my trees grow.
You need to buy some more quick growing trees.
Yeah, I know, but I just think I just wish I'd started doing this when I was 25, and instead of just milking cows and spreading fertilizer. Chasing slurry around concrete.
I thought you were about to say chasing boys, but anyway.
No, that's what I've taken. What have you taken, Liz? I hope you've got a good one.
I'm still thinking. No, I think it's that idea that that it's about. Well, we came onto it a bit, but that support network, didn't it? In terms of having someone to, and it doesn't have to be someone on your farm. It's a mate you can ring up and share ideas with. I think we forget how important it is to have people sharing our ideas, and because sometimes it can be a struggle, particularly dealing with family farming situations, that it just feels like it's a constant negativity coming towards you. So I think that's what trying to get a gang of people around you is important.
Yeah, when you talk to your insane friend, you feel sane.
Exactly. That's why I'm friends with Nick.
Two-man echo chamber.
But William, when you go to America, we want little YouTube clips, podcasts. Don't just go and disappear, because we're going to milk you for what you're worth. And also, George Henry just says, "Can we have a book list, please?" How are we going to do that?
Or take some. If you can, there's the Twitter message I set up, or Nick sent. Can you, if you possible, just to send photos of them or something like that via Twitter, and then I can
essentially just go on Audible and type in regenerative agriculture, and anything that comes up, we've probably listened to it.
Okay.
So do you listen when you're working, just with ear pod things, or how do you do it?
Yeah, I spent a lot of yesterday fencing, and I got through half of Holistic Management by Alan Savory. So yeah, you just listen to it while you're working.
Yeah, I put up 4 meters of wall the other day thanks to Nicole Masters. She got me through it all.
think what's also interesting, if you're saying like me, you remember as you go past that wall or the fence what you were listening to.
Oh,
It's
God,
actually
yeah.
it's quite a good memory prompt as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah.
So Liz, just going. So we're going to have. I don't know if we're going to do this monthly, are we, or maybe every?
Yeah, we're aiming for one in Feb and one in April.
And then obviously carbon calling is in June. We're going to get more information out about that soon.
Yeah.
We're just working on the kind of program. But if anyone's got any ideas, or if you want to help on the day, just get in touch. It'll be good.
25th of June.
25th
That's the
of
key.
June.
Date.
That's a Saturday, isn't it? Saturday, and then we'll do. But basically, you've got to come to Cumbria for the whole of that weekend. You can camp, stay in a hotel. There's going to be beers, a bit of music. So just make it a session, an educational session. Anyway, we're rabbiting on now. Let's stop.
Yeah. Thank you very much, William. Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody. We'll send some details out for the next one, which will be Feb time, end of Feb. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.